Hi guys, today we're going to talk about how to store water for an emergency. But before I get into what exactly I am doing here, let's talk about all of your options. Typically, people end up buying water from the grocery store, and that's going to come in 3 different versions. You're going to have your little single-serve water bottles like you see here, a 2.5-gallon larger container, or the 1-gallon like milk jugs but with water in them. I've used all 3 of these over the years, and they all have some negatives when it comes to long-term water storage for your house. First, a certain percentage of these bottles have all started leaking on me within a year. They are typically slow leaks, but it will create a puddle. If you're not paying attention, it can damage whatever that water bottle is sitting on. Of course, the second problem is that these are just single-use plastics. Some of them can be recycled, but I particularly hate using those single-use water bottles, especially since you need so many of them for emergency water storage. So let's talk about how many of each you would need for a family. The CDC and FEMA recommend that you have at least 1 gallon of water per person in your family per day, and that is just for drinking water, washing and preparing food, and washing hands. So that does not include washing your body or flushing your toilet. So just remember that. It's just 1 gallon per person per day for the basics. FEMA also recommends that you have a 2-week supply of water for each person in your house. And don't forget, you'll also need water for pets, so keep that in mind. I typically only have 1 week's worth of water in my house. I feel like if something happens where I don't have water for 2 weeks, I'm probably just going to leave the house and go somewhere where I can have access to water. So the first downside was that the thinner plastics will eventually get pinhole leaks in them. The second thing was that I don't like using single-use plastics, especially those smaller single-use water bottles. The third downside is the amount of these things that you would need for a typical family of 4 for 1 week. So those 2.5-gallon containers are obviously the easiest to store and take up the least amount of room. So for 4 people in one family with those 2.5-gallon containers, you would need to be able to store 12 of them to have one week's worth of emergency water storage. So just think of in your house whether or not you have room for 12 of those large containers, and on a space where if they start to leak, they're not going to ruin whatever they're sitting on. But that 2.5-gallon size is still pretty easy to carry around, and they come with a really convenient spout. So I like to put those on the edge of a sink, and it just becomes a hand washing station or a cup filling station really easily. The next size down is the 1-gallon milk jug style bottles. So they become more of a problem to store because for a family of 4, you need to find room for 28 of those gallon jugs in your house. You can't just stack these on top of each other because that will make the leaks happen faster. Again, you have to make sure you're not stacking these on top of wood or in cabinets where something's going to get ruined if a leak goes unnoticed for a while. So especially if you live somewhere like I do in Houston where we don't have basements, it's hard to find places to store all of these different smaller containers. For those smallest water bottles, those 16-ounce water bottles, you would need 184 of those for a family of 4 for 1 week's worth of water storage. So that is 8 of those huge 24-pack water bottles. And again, stacking creates a problem over time. It's going to break that plastic faster. So finding a place to store all of that is an issue. So I decided to figure out a more permanent solution. I ended up finding these 6-gallon jugs. They're designed for emergency water storage. They're not for chemicals or anything else. They're specifically designed for water. They are BPA free, so they're safe for drinking water. I went with 6 gallons. They come in different sizes. So 6 gallons gets to the point where it's almost too heavy for me to carry around. So keep that in mind when you're deciding which size to buy for your house. But I liked the thinner design because I can slot these into a closet really easily and they don't take up too much space. Each of these containers came with a convenient spout that you can use for pouring water out. So the next time we have an emergency, I'll put that spout on and I'll pour water into pitchers and other containers that we have in the house that are easier to use and not as heavy to lift. And remember, no matter what container you put your water storage in, you need to store it out of direct sunlight, so in a shady spot like in a closet or a basement, and in a temperature range between 50 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit is ideal. That'll keep your water tasting fresh and stored longer. if you follow those two guidelines. So don't put this in your attic. Keep it somewhere nice and cool and shady. And if you need emergency water for flushing your toilet, you could always use a bucket to scoop up pool water to manually flush your toilet, or fill up a bathtub. So if you know a hurricane's coming, you might lose your water, fill up a bathtub and use the water in that bathtub to flush your toilet. That won't be drinking water, just for flushing toilets. Okay, now let's quickly go over the steps that you need to follow to get those store-bought containers ready for emergency water storage. So again, this is a food-grade, BPA-free water storage container. I'm just going to put a couple drops of Dawn dish soap into this container to get it ready, to get it clean, and use a little bit of hot water. And then I'm going to swish this around. So it's probably clean from the factory, but just in case there's any machine oils or residue left in it, I want to get the inside clean before I put my water in it. So really make sure that that dish soap is making, and that hot water is making contact with all of the surfaces inside of that container. Move it around for a minute or two. And then since I'm using 6 different containers, I just poured that dish soap into the next container to clean it. So after you wash it or rinse it out or wash it with the dish soap, you're going to rinse that out with water. So just add a little clean water, swish it around again inside the container, and keep pouring it out and doing it over and over again until you get rid of all of the suds that are inside that container. So you have to get out all of that soap residue before you can do the last step to sanitize that container for emergency water storage. After you get all of that soap residue out of the container, now you put about 1 teaspoon of bleach in there with about 1 quart of water. So you can just guess at this a little bit. That bleach is going to be the final step to make sure that there's no bacteria or anything in that container that will make your water supply go bad. Again, add that bleach and water and swish it all around. You want it to make contact with every bit of the surface inside of that container. And make sure you're using 5 to 9% concentration household bleach with no scents added to it. After I finished that one container, I just poured that into the next container to clean that out. Once that first container is done, once you've made contact with all of the inside with that bleach, give it another rinse again with nice cold tap water. It's actually not important to get the bleach out at this point for a 6-gallon container because it is safe to have a tiny bit of bleach in water. It does help preserve the water longer, and you already have that sort of chlorine in the normal water supply as it is. Actually, FEMA recommends adding 2 drops of 5 to 9% concentration bleach to 1 gallon of water to preserve it, to make it safe drinking water in emergencies. All right, after cleaning out the containers with the bleach, I was ready to just fill the containers with tap water. So tap water or even store-bought water is going to have a shelf life of between 1 to 2 years. Usually in the store-bought water, there's an expiration date that's on it. If you want to extend the life of your emergency water storage, you can make that water more alkaline with some drops that I found online. These alkaline drops are even popular with campers that want to make boiled water safe to drink and to have it taste better. So adding these alkaline drops just makes your water taste fresh longer. When water expires, it's really probably safe to drink still. It just tastes really stale and bad. So the alkaline drops are supposed to make your water taste fresh for longer. Now, this company says that these drops will make your water taste fresh for up to 6 years. So using these drops is optional. At this point, you could just shelve your tap water and count on just replacing it after about 1.5 years or 2 years so that you have it so that it tastes fresh. But if you want to try to extend that life of the water and keep it fresh tasting longer, I'm trying these drops. So I'm putting about 2.5 teaspoons in each 6-gallon container. So I'm still labeling my containers, and after 2 years, I'm going to test the water and see if it still tastes fresh. When I decide that I do need to replace this water, I'll end up pouring it into my pool or onto my flower bed so that I don't waste this water. Okay, after getting my emergency water supply ready, I labeled it with the date that I made it and the date that I want to check it. So I'm going to check this water in 2 years for freshness to see if it's lasting or if I need to replace it. Okay, that's it for how to get an emergency water supply ready, guys. And if you want to see what my food supply is that I get ready for emergencies like hurricanes coming to town, check the links in the description. I'll put a link to a free printable that I have where you can get your food supply ready before any hurricanes or winter storms. Thanks, guys, and have a great day.